Welcome to Hollywood Secrets Information. In this video, we are going back to the glamorous but surprisingly scandalous world of Golden Age Hollywood, where some of the biggest female stars were famous not only for their beauty and talent, but also for their shocking language, rebellious personalities, provocative behavior, and refusal to follow Hollywood's rules. From Clara Bow's wild reputation to Tallulah Bankhead's legendary outspokenness, these women challenged the standards of their time. So stay with us as we uncover the fascinating stories behind 11 Golden Age actresses who became known for being unusually bold, outspoken, provocative, or vulgar by the standards of their era. 1. Clara Bow. Clara Bow was one of the most famous stars of the silent film era, and her personality was almost as legendary as her movies. Born in Brooklyn in 1905, Bow rose from a difficult childhood to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars of the 1920s. Her breakthrough came with it, the 1927 film that turned her into the original It Girl. But behind the glamorous image was a woman who refused to behave like the perfectly controlled Hollywood ladies expected by society. Clara spoke openly, acted impulsively, and developed a reputation for living life on her own terms. Newspapers and gossip columns frequently focused on her private life, relationships, parties, and supposedly unconventional behavior. Some of the stories surrounding her were exaggerated, and Hollywood publicity could be extremely cruel toward successful women, but Bow undeniably became associated with a more liberated image of femininity. Her famous flapper persona represented a generation that was moving away from Victorian social restrictions. She was energetic, direct, emotional, and sometimes deliberately provocative. What later generations might describe as vulgar was often part of her rejection of old-fashioned respectability. Clara Bow did not fit comfortably into the polished mold of a studio-controlled actress. She represented the modern woman of the jazz age, independent, sensual, outspoken, and unwilling to pretend that she was something she wasn't. That combination made her one of the most fascinating and controversial stars of early Hollywood. 2. Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead was almost impossible to ignore. Long before modern celebrities became famous for shocking interviews and outrageous personalities, Bankhead had already perfected the art of saying exactly what she wanted. Born in Alabama in 1902, she became a successful stage and screen actress, but her reputation extended far beyond her performances. Tallulah was famous for her deep voice, razor-sharp wit, fearless humor, and extremely uninhibited public persona. She could be brutally honest and frequently used language that was considered shocking for a respectable woman of her era. Her personality was so enormous that even people who disliked her often remembered her. Bankhead also became famous for outrageous stories about parties, relationships, and her unconventional social life. Some anecdotes were probably exaggerated over the years, but she actively encouraged her image as a woman who refused to be controlled. Unlike many actresses who carefully protected a ladylike public image, Tallulah seemed to enjoy destroying that image. She could be glamorous one moment and completely outrageous the next. Her humor was often dark, sarcastic, and deliberately provocative. She understood that scandal could become part of celebrity, and she used that attention to strengthen her identity. What made Bankhead especially remarkable was that she did not simply survive Hollywood's judgment. She turned the judgment itself into entertainment. She became an icon of theatrical excess and rebellious sophistication. In an industry obsessed with controlling female stars, Tallulah Bankhead was practically uncontrollable. Her legendary personality remains one of the clearest examples of how an actress could turn bad behavior into a powerful personal brand. 3. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford built one of the longest and most complicated careers in Hollywood history. She began as a dancer and silent film performer before becoming one of MGM's most recognizable stars. Crawford was famous for ambition, discipline, glamour, and an intense determination to remain successful. But her personality could also be blunt, aggressive, and intimidating. Unlike the soft-spoken image expected from many female stars, Crawford developed a reputation for speaking her mind and refusing to accept disrespect. Her career was filled with reinventions, and she repeatedly fought against the Hollywood system when she believed it was treating her unfairly. The word vulgar was sometimes used by critics to describe aspects of Crawford's personality, particularly when she was considered too ambitious, too emotional, or too openly forceful. Yet many of those judgments reflected the double standard faced by powerful women. A confident male star might be called tough, while an equally determined actress could be called difficult. Crawford also became famous for her intense rivalries, particularly her complicated relationship with other actresses and studio personalities. Her screen image frequently emphasized strength, passion, and determination rather than delicate femininity. She could be elegant in front of the camera while remaining fiercely competitive behind it. Crawford's story therefore goes beyond gossip. She represented the ruthless side of Hollywood ambition, where actresses had to fight to remain relevant as they aged. Whether one considers her behavior glamorous, intimidating, excessive, or vulgar, Joan Crawford understood one thing better than almost anyone. Hollywood rewards people who know how to survive. And Crawford survived for decades. 4. Lupe Vélez. Lupe Vélez was one of Hollywood's most energetic and unpredictable personalities. Born in Mexico in 1908, she came to the United States and built a career in Hollywood during the 1920s and 1930s. Her fiery personality quickly became part of her public image. Vélez was often portrayed by the press as passionate, emotional, impulsive, and difficult to control. She became particularly famous for her performances in the Mexican Spitfire series, where her comic energy and exaggerated temper became central to her screen persona. But the public also became fascinated with her real-life relationships and highly publicized romances. Tabloids frequently transformed her private life into entertainment, and her passionate personality made her an easy target for sensational reporting. Some stories about Vélez were undoubtedly exaggerated by the press, which often stereotyped Latina actresses as fiery or uncontrolled. Nevertheless, Vélez embraced a larger-than-life personality that contrasted sharply with the restrained behavior expected from traditional Hollywood women. She was expressive, outspoken, and emotionally intense. Her comedy depended heavily on physical energy and exaggerated reactions, making her one of the most distinctive performers of her generation. Unfortunately, her life ended tragically in 1944 at only 36 years old. Her story is therefore both fascinating and heartbreaking. Lupe Vélez should not be remembered merely through the sensational stories surrounding her. She was a talented performer who helped establish a recognizable Latina presence in early American cinema. Her reputation for being vulgar was partly connected to the exaggerated stereotypes and publicity machine of her era, but her fearless personality made her impossible to forget. 5. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich was one of the most sophisticated stars of Golden Age Hollywood, yet she deliberately played with the boundaries of what society considered respectable. Born in Germany in 1901, Dietrich became an international sensation after starring in The Blue Angel and later established herself in Hollywood. Her distinctive appearance, deep voice, glamorous clothing, and sophisticated manner made her unlike almost anyone else on screen. Dietrich famously challenged traditional ideas about femininity. She sometimes wore tuxedos and traditionally masculine clothing, while maintaining an unmistakably glamorous presence. She also cultivated an aura of mystery and independence around her personal life. The press was fascinated by her friendships, romances, and unconventional lifestyle. Rather than trying to appear innocent, Dietrich understood the power of ambiguity. She could be elegant and provocative at the same time. Her performances often depended on suggestion, confidence, and psychological control rather than obvious displays. This made her especially controversial in an era when Hollywood morality codes attempted to restrict what could be shown or discussed. Dietrich's behavior was not necessarily vulgar in the ordinary sense. In fact, she was often remarkably refined. But by challenging conventional gender roles and openly embracing her independence, she could appear shocking to conservative audiences. Her influence extended far beyond her movies. She became a fashion icon, a symbol of sexual independence, and an example of a woman who refused to allow society to define her identity. Dietrich demonstrated that rebellion did not always have to look crude. Sometimes it could arrive wearing a perfectly tailored suit, speaking in a low voice, and completely ignoring the rules. 6. Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh is usually remembered for elegance, beauty, and extraordinary acting, especially as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. But behind that sophisticated image was a much more complicated personality. Leigh was born in British India in 1913 and eventually became one of the most celebrated actresses of her generation. Her public image was generally refined, yet people close to her described periods of intense emotion, frustration, and difficult behavior. Her relationship with Laurence Olivier was closely followed by the public, and their marriage became one of the most famous theatrical partnerships of the 20th century. Leigh could be charming and graceful, but she could also be fiercely outspoken when she felt strongly about something. Her determination to play certain roles demonstrated that she was not simply a beautiful star waiting for studio approval. She had a powerful artistic ambition and wanted to be taken seriously as an actress. The label vulgar is therefore somewhat misleading when applied to Leigh. Much of what made her controversial was the contrast between her elegant public image and the emotional intensity that could emerge in private. Hollywood and the press often expected actresses to maintain perfect composure, and Leigh did not always fit that expectation. Her life was marked by professional triumphs, personal struggles, and periods of great instability. Yet her talent remained extraordinary. From Scarlett O'Hara to Blanche DuBois, Leigh repeatedly demonstrated an ability to portray complicated women with tremendous emotional force. Her story reminds us that the glamorous image presented by Golden Age Hollywood rarely told the whole story. 7. Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield became one of the most recognizable blonde stars of the 1950s, and she understood the power of publicity better than almost anyone. Born in Pennsylvania in 1933, Mansfield pursued acting and eventually became one of Hollywood's most famous bombshells. She was often compared with Marilyn Monroe, but Mansfield developed her own deliberately exaggerated personality. Her public image was playful, loud, glamorous, and sometimes intentionally outrageous. She understood that photographers and newspapers were always looking for something sensational, and she gave them plenty to talk about. Mansfield frequently used humor and exaggerated femininity as part of her act. She could appear sophisticated for a film premiere and then deliberately behave in an outrageous manner for the cameras. Her famous pink-themed mansion and highly publicized appearances became part of her celebrity mythology. Critics sometimes dismissed her as vulgar because they believed her personality relied too heavily on glamour and attention. But there was another side to Mansfield. She was intelligent, ambitious, and interested in serious acting. She studied drama and wanted to demonstrate that she was more than a glamorous blonde. The tragedy was that Hollywood often preferred the exaggerated bombshell image because it sold magazines and movie tickets. Mansfield therefore became trapped between the actress she wanted to be and the celebrity persona audiences expected. Her vulgar reputation was largely connected to that deliberately provocative public image. Yet she was also a skilled publicity performer who understood exactly how Hollywood worked. In many ways, Jayne Mansfield was not simply a victim of celebrity culture. She was one of its most enthusiastic participants. 8. Myrna Loy. Myrna Loy was known as one of Hollywood's most elegant actresses, but her career contained a surprisingly rebellious side. Born in Montana in 1905, Loy initially appeared in a variety of roles before becoming a major star. Her breakthrough came partly through characters that allowed her to demonstrate sophisticated humor and a more modern attitude toward relationships. Her famous performances opposite William Powell, especially in the Thin Man series, created an image of marriage that was witty, playful, and much less prudish than the traditional romantic formulas of the era. Loy's screen persona often featured a woman who could drink, joke, argue, flirt, and hold her own against men. That was unusual for the period. Instead of portraying women as passive romantic interests, she often played characters who were intelligent and confident. Some conservative viewers considered this attitude too modern or even vulgar. Yet Loy's appeal came precisely from that independence. She could deliver sarcastic lines with perfect timing and turn a supposedly respectable social setting into a comedy of manners. Her career also demonstrated that female stars did not need to rely solely on innocence to become popular. Loy could be glamorous without being helpless and sophisticated without being submissive. Her public image remained considerably more controlled than some of the other women on this list, but her screen persona quietly challenged traditional expectations. She helped create a new kind of Hollywood woman, one who could be funny, intelligent, independent, and fully involved in the relationship rather than simply waiting for the hero. Myrna Loy's rebelliousness was therefore less about shock and more about changing what audiences expected from a leading lady. 9. Jane Russell. Jane Russell became one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars of the 1940s and 1950s, largely because of an image that challenged the conservative standards of the period. She gained enormous attention after being cast in Howard Hughes's The Outlaw, a film whose marketing emphasized her glamorous appearance. The movie became notorious even before many audiences had seen it, partly because Hughes's publicity campaign pushed Russell's image far beyond what was considered conventional at the time. Russell herself was more complicated than the bombshell persona created around her. She had a strong personality, a confident sense of humor, and an ability to laugh at the exaggerated image Hollywood had built around her. Her performances often combined glamour with comedy, which helped distinguish her from actresses who were marketed purely as romantic figures. Russell also became known for playing women who were confident rather than timid. That confidence could be interpreted as provocative during an era when female stars were often expected to appear innocent and restrained. She was never simply the passive object that publicity campaigns suggested. In interviews and public appearances, Russell could be outspoken and humorous, and she developed a reputation for being refreshingly direct. The Vulgar label therefore says more about the Hollywood publicity machine than about Russell herself. Studios and producers knew that controversy sold tickets, and Russell became one of the biggest examples of that strategy. Her career demonstrates how the line between a woman's own personality and the image created for her by Hollywood could become extremely difficult to separate. 10. Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons possessed one of the most remarkable combinations of beauty, intelligence, and acting ability in classic cinema. Born in London in 1929, she began acting as a teenager and quickly became a major British star before moving successfully into American films. Unlike some actresses who built their careers around a deliberately provocative public persona, Simmons was generally associated with elegance and serious acting. However, several of her performances challenged traditional ideas about feminine innocence. She could portray characters who were emotionally complicated, passionate, rebellious, or morally uncertain. This range sometimes made her appear more provocative than the polished image associated with classic Hollywood actresses. Simmons also demonstrated that a woman could be both glamorous and psychologically complex. Her performances in films such as Hamlet, The Big Country, and Guys and Dolls showed an impressive range. Rather than relying entirely on a carefully manufactured bombshell persona, She allowed her acting to create tension and complexity. In this sense, calling Jean Simmons vulgar is more about the roles and cultural standards surrounding some of her work than about her personal reputation. She belonged to a generation of actresses who gradually moved Hollywood away from the rigidly controlled female characters of earlier decades. Simmons could portray vulnerability, strength, sensuality, intelligence, and rebellion without reducing her characters to a single stereotype. Her career is an excellent reminder that Golden Age Hollywood was changing rapidly. The sophisticated female star was becoming more independent, and Simmons was one of the actresses who helped make that transition believable. 11. Brigitte Bardot. Brigitte Bardot was not an American Golden Age star in the traditional sense, but her influence on Hollywood's image of the glamorous and rebellious actress was enormous. Born in France in 1934, Bardot became an international sensation during the 1950s and 1960s. Her youthful appearance, carefree personality, fashion, and unconventional screen presence helped create a new kind of celebrity. Bardot did not project the carefully controlled elegance associated with earlier Hollywood stars. Instead, she represented spontaneity, independence, and a rejection of traditional social expectations. Her breakthrough in And God Created Woman made her internationally famous and also sparked controversy. Bardot's image became associated with a new generation that wanted greater freedom from conservative social rules. She was often portrayed as rebellious, unpredictable, and provocative, while magazines eagerly turned her personal life into entertainment. Yet reducing Bardot to her image would overlook her larger cultural impact. She became a fashion icon whose hairstyle, clothing, and relaxed approach to glamour influenced women around the world. She also eventually became increasingly selective about acting and withdrew from cinema at a relatively young age. Her career demonstrated how celebrity culture was changing from the tightly controlled studio system of the 1930s and 1940s toward a more personal and media-driven form of fame. Bardot's reputation for being vulgar was therefore connected largely to how radically different she appeared from the traditional Hollywood lady. She represented a generation that wanted to live by its own rules, and audiences could not look away. And there you have it, the fascinating stories of 11 actresses who challenged the traditional rules of glamour, femininity, and respectability. From Clara Bow and Tallulah Bankhead to Jayne Mansfield and Brigitte Bardot, each woman created a different kind of controversy, and many of them were judged by standards that were far stricter for women than for men. Some deliberately embraced provocative images, while others were labeled controversial simply because they refused to behave as society expected. Which actress do you think had the boldest personality? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden and surprising side of classic cinema, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Hollywood Secrets Information, and turn on notifications for more stories from Hollywood's fascinating past. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next Hollywood Secrets Information video.